because of
Mhm.
what was happening. Um, can you, for the people that haven't read that, can you talk about like the creation of Georgia and what it was actually designed to do?
Yeah, Georgia plays a key role in my 1776 story. What happens is that in the 1730s, London decides that it needs a buffer between Spanish Florida. Spain, beginning in 1565, was occupied by His Catholic Majesty's forces, particularly in St. Augustine, Florida, which carries the reputation of being the oldest city, the oldest settlement in North America. And then for a 20-year period, it was occupied by the British between 1763 and 1783, and then returned to Spanish rule. And then the Yankees ousted the Spanish circa 1820, 1821. But in any case, what happens is that His Catholic Majesty had religion as a major marker for society. This is one of the reasons why, if you're going to understand 1776, it's not enough to begin even the story in 1750.
Right.
You have to really go back to the 1500s, which is what I do in my book, The Apocalypse of Settler
To the colonial.
Colonialism, which deals with the 17th century and the dawning of the apocalypse, which deals with the 1500s. Because what happens is I tell the story that religion was the major marker of privilege
Mm.
by His Catholic Majesty and his forces. For example, in Cuba, as early as the 1500s, under the rule of the Spanish, you had Africans who professed Catholicism who could carry arms, for
Right.
example. But what happens, as many in your audience must know, is that circa 1517, you had the Protestant secession from the Catholic Church led by Martin Luther, not Martin Luther King, but Martin Luther. And that leads to a round robin of religious wars between the Protestants and the Catholics throughout the 1500s. At a certain point, Protestantism takes control of London, and London wants to get in on the colonial feast and compete with Spain, but there are not enough Protestants to go around, so they move from religion to race as a marker. I
Mm.
start off the 1500s book by quoting Andrew Young, still in the land of the living, former mayor of Atlanta, former congressman from Atlanta. When he's UN ambassador in 1977, he gets into hot water when he says it's the British who invent racism, for
Wow.
example. Now, as I say in the book, he should have also distributed some of the blame to the settlers,
Right.
the British settlers in North America.
Hmm.
Because what that led to was that those who had been warring on the shores of Europe, English versus Irish, English versus Scot, English versus Welsh, Britain versus German, German versus Pole, Pole versus Russian, Serb versus Croat, Northern Italian versus Southern Italian. All of a sudden, when they crossed the Atlantic, they're rebranded as white,
Yes. Right.
which helps to give a surge to white supremacy, which we're still grappling with. And so when Britain establishes this settlement in Georgia, they basically say no Africans allowed, no black people allowed. Now, I was just in Atlanta a few days ago, and one of the things that strikes you about Atlanta that strikes me, God, you seem to see black people everywhere.
Everywhere.
And
Everywhere.
well, obviously, that plan did not pan out.
Right.
No
Right.
Negroes allowed in Georgia.
Right.
But what they were trying to do was stop what happened in 1739 with Stono's revolt, when His Catholic Majesty's soldiers, ebony soldiers, come across the border and help to stir up the enslaved Africans, leading to the bloodiest revolt of the enslaved in the colonial history of North America. But what happens is that they're not able to maintain this so-called white buffer,
Hmm.
a white sanctuary, a white wall of settlers, because it leads to conflicts between and amongst the poor Europeans and the richer Europeans, for
Hmm.
example. And slavery, particularly black slavery, it helps to curb this conflict between the poor Europeans and the richer Europeans, because they're all afraid that the enslaved population will rise up as one and cut their throats,
Hmm.
one and all, which of course was a possibility. And so, despite that, the profits from slavery are too grand to ignore. And so, within perhaps 10 or 15 years of this proclamation of no Africans allowed in Georgia, Africa was teeming, Georgia was teeming with Africans, which is still the case today as my recent trip to Atlanta
Hmm.
to show.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you mentioned like and about this evolving in the colonies is idea of whiteness, right? And how, but that was somewhat out of necessity too, because of the rebellions that were going on, right? Like they needed the numbers because in many of those states we outnumbered them.
Clearly, I mean, this is one of the points I tried to make, that you have to look at the liberties, so called, brought by the Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments to the US Constitution. You have to see it as combat pay. That is to say, if you're in the military, sometimes you can get an extra